立法會主席
President. Good morning, members. Mr. Chen Chi-Chen, I want a quorum count. Good morning, members. Members, yesterday I reminded you repeatedly that this debate will last until 10 a.m. today, and it will finish. I've seriously looked into the time required for debates in the past, and having considered the business that we have to deal with in the remainder of our term, I think we should make the best use of meeting time available so as to enable the Council to function efficiently. That's why for each debate, I have allocated a reasonable timeline, which I have already told members clearly. But whether members would like to make the best use of the time available for the debate is up to members. That's not up to me. If some members choose to have the bell sounded to call members back, and the majority of members choose to return only after the bell has been sounded for 10 or 11 minutes, or even refrain from returning to the chamber, I cannot really really force you to use all the speaking time in the debate. I know a number of members, in particular those members who have moved amendments, who would like to speak. But yesterday, when we had the quorum counts, we spent 4 hours and 15 minutes. We lost at least the speaking time the equivalent of the speaking time of 17 members. As I've said, this is your choice, which I cannot change. If you continue to go on like this, if you want to spend our meeting time like this, then those members who did not have a chance to speak could only ask their fellow party members to be more cooperative so that we can allow more members to participate in the debate and speak. On the waiting list, we have Dr. Elizabeth Kwok, who hasn't spoken yet. As I said yesterday, I'll invite her to speak first, and then we'll have the officials. As for other members, I'll refer to the order of the speaking the time allocated, and that would take us up to 10 a.m. Chairman, well, this is a debate on the CSAs to the Appropriation Bill 2016.
But throughout yesterday, I cannot see what we have debated. As you said, Chairman, there were 20 quorum calls, wasting 4 hours 15 minutes of council time. Mr. Chairman, it is actually not the first time that members have abused quorum calls and filibustering to waste meeting time. If we look at Hansard from 2012 to 2016 February, there have been 1,200 quorum calls, wasting over 160 hours, and that would add up to 17 days. If we spend about $200,000 on each hour of council time, that would mean $30 million lost for taxpayers. As members said, if these amendments were meaningful, then these 163 amendments might not have been debated upon even by using up all the time the chairman has given us. But as the chairman said, members have chosen to waste the time away. Just look at the 163 amendments. What are they about, Mr. Chairman? Yesterday, many members have already said that many amendments are meaningless and they are here for no particular purpose. I'd like to mention a few. Say, for example, number 26, Mr. Leung Kwok-hong would like to cut the annual expenditure for the CAS. Does it mean that we should not rescue people and help people in need? And Mr. Raymond Chan says he would like to cut the annual expenditure for CSD. And also Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, he goes beyond that. He wants to cut the annual expenditure for wages to be given to inmates. In other words, there will be no way inmates in our prisons can seek to rehabilitate. And Mr. Ray Chan is also saying he wants to cut the annual expenditure for CNSD. And Mr. Leung Kwok-hong is saying he'd like to cut the annual expenditure for minor machinery, vehicles, and other facilities for the CNSD. Does it mean that we don't need to deal with smuggling activities? The same goes for the FSD. Mr. Ray Chan likes to cut his whole year's expenditure, and Mr. Leung Kwok-hong again adds to that to say he wants to cut the expenditure for facilities and equipment as well. And Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan is saying that there should be no purchase of more fireboats. Now, what do they want? Yesterday, 5 unions of the FSD have sent a joint statement to us saying that if these are carried, then the FSD cannot continue to operate. That means nobody will be fighting fires and doing rescue operations. Mr. Ray Chan said yesterday that these 5 unions were mobilized by the pro-establishment members so that they issued the joint statement. Is that the case? I hope Mr. Ray Chan will not insult the wisdom of the FSD colleagues. I think after these few years, FSD colleagues now know exactly what Mr. Ray Chan is doing. What if these amendments are really passed? What will happen? Mr. Leung Kwok-hong says he wants to cut expenditure for the civil service, one of which is to cut the OEA for civil servants' children. Why do you want to target even the children of civil servants? And also, the annual expenditure for emergency relief and other welfare should also be cut. In other words, even if civil servants are in any urgent need or emergency, they will not be helped. Again, Mr. Ray Chan wants to cut the annual expenditure for the Immigration Department, and Mr. Leung Kwok-hong particularly targets the repatriation charges. This goes to mean that nobody should be repatriated even if they flout our immigration laws in entering Hong Kong. And also Mr. Ray Chan wants to cut the annual expenditure for ICAC. Why? I think you can only ask Mr. Ray Chan. Mr. Albert Chan wants to cut the annual expenditure for the DOJ so nobody will be prosecuted. And Mr. Leung Kwok-hong again wants to cut the annual expenditure for the Legal Aid Department. And targeting pension, Mr. Leung Kwok-hong is saying that for those widows or widowers who are survived by their spouses and children, now these expenditure for helping the orphans and the widowed should be cut, he says. And then there are a few that target the police. Mr. Ray Chan says the annual expenditure for the entire police force should be cut. Do they have any meaning? Why are they targeting the disciplined forces? What are they doing? Why do they want to waste our time in raising all these amendments? Mr. Ray Chan says there should be no expenditure for the Narcotics Bureau. Are you encouraging people to take drugs? He's also saying we should cut the expenditure of the government flying service. Again, no rescue operations would be possible. So if you look at these 163 amendments, they are meaningless. If they had any meaning at all, it would be for these opposition camp members to seek exposure on camera. Or else, why would they be asking for quorum counts? It is because they have nothing really to say on these amendments, so they have sought to waste time by having quorum calls. Last time we had a meeting of 9 hours and they wasted 4 hours, 15 minutes on quorum calls. So, Mr. Chairman, you don't need to reserve so much time for them in future debates. If these amendments are passed, it will be a disaster for Hong Kong, but they still dare to raise them. It is because they know the pro-establishment camps would be here to safeguard the interests of Hong Kong. For the sake of Hong Kong, we will always be sitting here defending Hong Kong's interests. And that is why they think they have a free hand to do whatever they want. They thought they would be able to get the applause of their supporters, and they actually thought that most people in Hong Kong did not know what they are doing. They cannot convince Hong Kong people that they are doing good to Hong Kong. If they had anything to say at all, if they wanted to say anything, they have numerous channels to do that as legislators. It would not be as what Mr. Ray Chan is saying, that he is speaking on behalf of the FSD, and so the firemen will thank them. Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan says he will actually object to his own amendment. Now, what kind of attitude, what kind of behavior are we witnessing? I would urge these members, don't be so selfish anymore, but pose yourselves to be magnanimous. This is a true democracy, a true hypocrisy indeed. I veto all the amendments. A point of order. Just now, Ms. Elizabeth Quat said that Mr. Ray Chan said yesterday that the joint statement made by the 5 FSD unions were the result of mobilization by pro-establishment camp members. I'd like to know where that came from. I did not say anything to that effect yesterday. Mr. Ray Chan, this is not a point of order. Please sit down. Mr. Chairman, but you had allowed other members to clarify or seek clarification of other members' speeches. So I want to clarify what she has said. Mr. Ray Chan, if you don't continue to get quorum calls and interrupt the meeting, I think you will be able to have some time to speak in response. There will be this rule in our debate, and that is if a member has made accusations that you think is not based on fact, then you can respond and refute that argument, and the public will know what is true and what is false. This is how debates should be conducted. But you have drawn a line at 10 a.m., and so I might not have the opportunity to speak. But if you would now sit down and listen in quiet, I'm sure you will have a chance to speak. The officials, Secretary for Security. Mr. Chairman, I speak in urging members to veto all the amendments raised in this second debate. In this second debate, some of the amendments would be responded to by the administration like this. Mr. Ray Chan, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan, and Mr. Albert Chan have moved 19 amendments to cut the vehicles and transportation and other equipment expenses for the police. We object to all these amendments because the police are here to maintain law and order and to protect the life and property of the public, and also to tackle crime. Hong Kong has a low crime rate. Hong Kong is one of the safest cities in the world. And that is because we can rely on this professional and well-equipped police force. The police need to enforce the law in an efficient manner, and they need to have all the equipment and vehicles and other facilities they need. In the appropriation bill, the police are given such facilities and equipment, and the police need them to do patrol in our waters, on land, and also to do transport management and to conduct other operations and missions. If these amendments are passed, the police will have grave difficulties in discharging their daily work, including the ability to crack down crime, and maybe some of the duties cannot be discharged, and in the end, the public would only be harmed. I would therefore urge members to object to all these amendments. Mr. Ray Chan, Mr. Wong Yok Man, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong also moved amendments to cut the expenses for IPCC, the operating expenses for that. We also object to these amendments. The statutory two-tier police complaint against the police system is effective and is well established. The CAPO investigates into complaints against the police, and the results of these investigations will be checked and vetted by the IPCC. The IPCC is an independent statutory body, and it monitors and supervises the investigative work of CAPO. According to IPCC ordinance, the administration must provide the necessary resources to the IPCC, and the IPCC will have to discharge its duties according to the ordinance, including that the CAPO would have to file detailed reports on all reportable complaints. The relevant mechanism makes sure that all the complaints against the police would be dealt with in a fair and just manner. Mr. Ray Chan, Mr. Wong Yuk Man, and Mr. Leung Kwok Hong moved these amendments, but they will only bring to one effect, and that is the IPCC will not be able to discharge its statutory duties to monitor and check the investigations done by the CAPO. And these proposals are, of course, flying in the face of public interest. I would urge members to veto these amendments. Mr. James Toh proposes to cut the annual expenditure for CAPO amounting to $79.4 million. We object to that amendment. If it is passed, it will not help to improve the present complaint against the police system. On the contrary, if CAPO doesn't have the expenditure it needs, people will not be able to file any complaints against the police, and the investigative work that is going on will have to be halted. The present two-tier system to deal with complaints against the police is a comprehensive system. The CAPO is responsible for handling and investigating into complaints against the police and is independent from other units in the police force. The results of investigation will be checked and vetted by the IPCC. The IPCC is an independent statutory body. It has statutory functions and powers to regulate the investigative work of the CAPO. The IPCC ordinance clearly states the legal basis for this two-tier system. It states clearly that the CAPO and the police would have to facilitate the work of the IPCC and accede to the requests made by IPCC on the basis of the law, including detailed reports to be filed on all reportable complaints. If the amendment is passed, the CAPO will not have any necessary expenses, and that would amount to making the entire complaint against the police system dysfunctional, and that is not going to benefit society. I will therefore ask members to veto Mr. James Toh's amendment. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, Mr. Ray Chan, and Mr. James Toh propose to cut the remuneration and allowance for special duties for the police. We object to the proposal. The subhead expenditure to the tune of $80.2 million for remuneration and special duties allowance, and they have to do with the confidential operations of the police, including combating drug offenses. These allowances have to be involved for paying informants' fees, and this is to deal with a lot of confidential operations. And such expenditure is crucial for protecting the public's safety and law and order. Since the expenditure under this subhead has to do with confidential police operations, information that is divulged about all these operations would only facilitate criminals knowing what the police is doing and trying to do against them. And in fact, threats might then be levied against police officers, and informants would not be happy to come up with information anymore. And actually, the police have already been giving as much information as possible, for example, in how many cases informants have been paid and the total amount of informants' fees paid.
The reward and special services expenditure would be instrumental to the investigation of police work. If Mr. Chen, Mr. Leung, or Mr. Toh have their way, removing their amendments, and they would be undermining the effectiveness of the police work and also undermine the security in Hong Kong. Mr. Lee Chao-yen, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong moved amendments regarding the expenditure of the Fire Services Department. The FSD is an important department providing emergency services for the members of the public. It is responsible for marine safety and fire rescue and fire prevention and firefighting. The funding is for the FSD in the way of remuneration, allowances, and so on. And the removal of these expenditure would make it impossible for the Fire Services Department to get on with his jobs regarding firefighting and rescue, and people's life and limbs and properties will be adversely affected. Other than providing firefighting and rescue services, the FSD is also enforcing the fire prevention related law. It is discharging its duties in way of enhancing awareness and publicity. The removal of the allowances will make it impossible for the Fire Services Department to do its work regarding fire prevention and licensing, and this will bring about a severe impact on people's lives. This is an emergency department. The FSD has all manner of vehicles and vessels, and they have to be kept in top working order. And in the eastern waters, the marine traffic is getting more and more busy. After considering the operational needs, there is a need to increase to invest in an operational vessel to be deployed to rescue work. The removal of the procurement of new vehicles and vessels on the part of the FSD and ambulances will make it impossible for the FSD to replace the equipment and to increase the necessary vehicles and vessels. This will severely undermine the efficiency of the FSD, and people's life and limbs and properties will not be properly protected. Mr. Raymond Chen, Mr. Albert Chen, Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan, and Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan moved amendments regarding Customs and Excise, CSD, government flying services. We object to these amendments. These departments are playing an important role for Hong Kong, and they are providing services that are closely related to everybody's life, and they are playing a significant role in maintaining stability and prosperity in Hong Kong. The removal of these expenditures will make it impossible for the departments to function, and not to mention the implications on the security of Hong Kong. Some members suggested that the Civil Service Department's expenditure on the national study and also pre-entry training, the government objects to these. Civil servants have to get to grips with the situation in the mainland. They have to understand the economic development and tie in with the mainland's development. In 2016, the CSB will arrange training on the basic law and also national affairs. There are study courses and programs and study thematic visits in the mainland, and there are also a whole string of seminars and talks in Hong Kong. There are joint programs run together with the mainland institutions for 7 to 11 days, and there are visits. The directorate staff will also visit the administrative institution in the mainland for training, and there are programs run by the Tsinghua and Peking University. 34 to 44 on the MPS, the staff can visit Jinan University, Zhejiang University for 1 week course. We've also commissioned the Foreign Affairs University to provide courses for civil servants from 4.45 up to study the Foreign Affairs course. There will be 650 civil servants who will be joining these courses. For local seminars, there are 13 5-year plan, One Belt, One Road, international situation, economic policies, geopolitics, rule of law, and so on. There are speakers from locally and also from overseas to do these talks. Basic law training, we do provide specific courses for new recruits for them to familiarize themselves with the fundamental concepts of the basic law. For those on the MPS 34 and up, There are specific trainings on the basic law, and there are tailor-made courses for individual bureaus and departments. We also have thematic talks on the basic law. It is expected that 15,000 civil servants on different ranks who will be joining training on the basic law and national studies costing us $18 million. There are suggestions that the civil servants' housing benefits should be slashed. Housing benefits form an important part of fringe benefits for the civil servants. The government sees the need for the housing allowance expenditure to be approved as soon as possible so that we can make available the allowances to the relevant staff. If we cannot make available the housing allowances, then there would be severe and immediate implications on the finance of civil servants, undermining the morale. In order to cater for the housing needs, the administration sees the need for these expenditure to be approved in order to maintain the morale of the civil servants and attractiveness of the civil service jobs. Regarding the judiciary, some members suggested that the witnesses and the jurors' fee should be slashed, and also the allocation for vehicles and the equipment should be slashed. The administration objects to this. The independence of the judiciary is upheld in the basic law. Judiciary independence means that the judges can sit in judgment fairly, impartially, without any interference or pressure from the executive and anybody else. Judicial independence is important, and it has to be financially supported, and the judiciary should be given sufficient resources to maintain the operation of the courts. If we remove the funding, then it would have severe implications on the judiciary. So the administration and the judiciary are opposed to the proposal to remove the funding. With these words, Mr. Chairman, I urge members to object to all the amendments in the second debate. Members remove the amendments. I will be speaking. Mr. Raymond Chan, Mr. Lee Chek-yen, and Mr. Leung Kwok. Mr. Raymond Chan. Thank you, Chairman. I would have thought that I wouldn't have the opportunity to speak in response. I've moved 25 amendments. I only spoke during the first round. In this debate, it is very heated. I've heard 10 members from the pro-establishment members who raised comments, who made their speeches, other than the Pandam members. Miss Elizabeth Court advanced some warped arguments in her speech, but I agree with her on one point. And she said that the chairman allocated the time, and even in absence of any quorum call, in absence of any scenario of the meeting being aborted, members will have sufficient time. Now, the pro-establishment members have 10 members who have spoken, and the members who moved the amendments only got to speak once. Luckily, with any luck, we would be able to speak twice. Does it mean that we have been given sufficient time? Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Ms. Regina Ip, Mr. Jeffrey Lam, and 6 other members made their arguments, to which I'd like to respond. Obviously, this is the last time I'm going to speak in this round. I don't think I can respond to them blow by blow. I can only make a consolidated reply. The DAB, Dr. N. Zhang, Chen Kam Lam, Tam Hui Chung, Yip Kok Him, and Chair Ms. Dara Lee and Ms. Elizabeth Quat, they raised doubts about our proposed amendments regarding the disciplined services. They think that we are being unreasonable and irresponsible. I think this is ludicrous. it sounds as if it is only this year that we've started this kind of debate on the budget. Over the years, there have been many members who spoke on these discipline forces and moved amendments to slash the funding. Why is it that they only think that this is something new? I think it shows that over the years they haven't taken any notice of our amendments. Mr. Chen Kam-nam? Well, it is an exciting argument, and we're running out of a quorum. I hope the members will be called back to the chamber.
陈志群议员。
Mr. Chen Chi-Chen. Thank you, Chairman. Viewers who are watching this over the television, I have to say that Mr. Chen Kam-lam asked for this quorum call. I thank Mr. Chen Kam-lam for doing this. So before his retirement, that he has come to this understanding that this council should not continue with its meeting without a quorum. He said that you have given a taste of your own medicine. I won't speculate on the motives, because according to rules of procedure 41 bracket 5, well, you should not try to the motives of members, whether it's about challenging people's baseline or the fact that you are going to put a stop to everything at 10 a.m. All these are not important. I hope both Pan-Democrats and loyalists should refer to 17 bracket 3 of the rules of procedure for a quorum call. And if the meeting is supported as a result, then we should not blame the one who asked for a quorum count. I was referred to the rules of procedure 41 bracket 5, and that is a member shall not impute improper motives to another member. Yesterday, and actually today, some members flouted this particular rule. Members proposed cuts to the items related to discipline services. Well, we have been doing that for years. We did it in previous years. But this time, we were unable to speak on those amendments. It's not that we are saying that those discipline services should be disbanded and we will become a lawless society like Detroit. Well, first of all, such amendments are nothing new. We can only move amendments to cut the expenditure, and we cannot increase the expenditure for these departments. We just wanted to point out the serious faults on the part of these departments. For example, there were amendments to cut the expenditure on food for prisoners. So you would say that we are abusing our prisoners and we have to take the case to the UN. Well, you should pay attention to the speeches made by the member moving the amendments. The member was actually criticizing the poor provision in terms of food, and it was inhumane. This time, I propose amendments to cut the sums for FSD. Well, this year I didn't have time to explain myself clearly, but I did so in the past. We were targeting at the government. We are targeting the management of FSD. Among the discipline services is most popular, and we support the FSD most among the discipline services. In the past, some members moved similar amendments, and I would like to refer to my past speeches on amendments to cut the sums for the FSD. The FSD procure wrong equipment on a number of occasions, and the audit commissions criticized the FSD for certain faults. For example, slow in responding to complaints and slow in conducting investigations, and they were unfair to their ambulancemen, and they favor fire officers, and the meal arrangements was improper. So I did say these things in moving amendments related to FSD. And some ambulancemen thank me for pointing out the inadequacies of the work of FSD. So you cannot just look at the proposed amendment itself and saying that we don't want the police, we don't want the CSD, and we don't want the FSD. And this will happen in the next debate. We are going to cut the CSSA. We are going to have all schools closed, and no children will get a proper education.
Okay.
Well, whether you mean it or not, whether you have just awakened today and you want to refute our arguments today, well, that's good. At least there is a debate so the public know what we are talking about, but you should not distort what we say. Miss Elizabeth Court might have read some newspapers to say that I said that pro-establishment camp members were behind the issuing of the joint statement by the 5 unions of FSD. I did not say it. I did not say anything to the reporters either. And I received a call from a reporter, and he or she was trying to lead me into saying that the FSD unions were too quick in issuing the statement. I did not speculate at all the motives of the unions. I think it is also good for them to raise this, because I'm trying to explain that we have been doing this in the past few years. This is nothing new. There is the Hansard recording every word we said, and you could see the justifications and rationale behind our moving the amendments. The unions can also look at our records and even view the videotapes on record. This is my second time speaking in this debate. It's so the last time. I have moved 25 amendments, but then you will say, okay, you are just raising the amendments for the sake of raising, and you don't give reasons. But now I want to explain them. But which one can I accommodate now? I want to cut the expenses for REO, and you actually said the same thing. In the cancelled people's registration status, we would like to talk about the lack of efforts in following up on bid rigging and vote rigging, and also political censorship for election mail. And I believe each of those topics will be able to take up 1 or 2 sessions of debate, but this time this is not possible. This is because of your arrangement, Mr. Chairman. I know that it is not meaningful for me to carry on this debate with you. You will not be the president next time. Ms. Priscilla Leung actually said that there is no way to amend the ROP, but the president's rulings can become new precedents. You are going to be the major group, and the president is also from the pro-establishment camp, and we cannot take this to judicial review. People will know what this council will become. Mr. Jasper Zhang will become someone like Mr. Chen Kam-lam. Mr. Wong Kwok Heng. Mr. Chairman, as Mr. Ray Chan said, we should not impute improper motives to other members. Just now he is doing it because he is saying that you are a DAB member, but that is only the description of a fact. Mr. Ray Chan, please continue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to respond that some establishment camp members say that it is fortunate that we have them and we have FC members, or else pro-democracy camp amendments will be passed and Hong Kong will become a city of crime like Detroit. Well, rest assured, if indeed the majority of this council are Democrats, then the FS dares not present such a rotten budget. It is because there are these pro-establishment camp members. Even if you are not happy with the budget in your heart, you are not happy with the OALA and the asset test, you are not happy with the lack of or absence of standard working hours, and you are not happy with the stagnation with regard to retirement protection. However, the administration can turn a deaf ear to you, and every year a very unsatisfactory budget can still be presented to this council. It is because the administration knows no matter how bad the budget is, in the end it will be carried. It is not just that it will be carried. We may not even have the room to criticize it in the CSA stage, in the committee stage. You will only cause the administration to do even a worse job in the future. I have heard the FTU criticize the budget in the second reading debate. Ms. Anne Chang has said something so remarkable. I have, in fact, cut that particular section to place on my Facebook. And she actually said that there should be a redistribution of wealth through the budget, but that is not done. The so-called struggles in this council when we debate the appropriation bill is to expose why the budget is unreasonable. And we want to exert pressure on the administration. Of course, the pressure is now shrunk to almost zero because we have a deadline for each debate and a date has been fixed for voting on the budget. But the FS is still not happy with it. Just last Sunday, he talked about a crisis that is not there in his blog. He is, of course, trying to exert pressure on the president to say that the president should not loosen his rules. If the majority of this council is made up by pro-democracy members, the FS just dares not present such a below-the-par budget. He would have to respond to the aspirations of different political parties. Let me talk about the asset test and means test for OALA. The Democrats asked for taking it away, and the DAB and the Liberal Party also thought that the asset test was set at too high a threshold. There was a promise to review it, but then 3 years, 4 years have passed and no review has been taken. Why is that? They said this will be subsumed under the retirement protection review, the regardless of rich and poor, so on and so forth. And so there is no review. They have dragged their feet. And as the council, we have already reached a consensus. We have said that the asset test is set at too high a threshold. And the old couples are saying they might have to divorce and they might have to divert their assets to be held by relatives before they will be qualified. But then this is the time when we debate the appropriation bill that we can exert pressure on the government. But then you are saying that we are those who are stirring up trouble. We are standing in the way of voting on the budget, and you reduce our very meaningful amendments to abolishing the Education Bureau, the SWD, so there will be no people sweeping the streets, no people taking care of the people of Hong Kong. Well, yesterday and this morning, you have heard other members speak and who imputed improper motives to members. I hope they will look at our previous records. I will never impute improper motives to members. It's just like what Mr. Ray Chan said. I only pointed out facts. The fact is, we have allocated time for the second debate, but over half of it has been spent on quorum counts. And the majority of quorum calls were asked for by Mr. Ray Chan. I'd just like to point out the fact that if Mr. Ray Chan chooses to use the time to speak instead of incessant quorum calls, I would think that in this session, in this debate, Mr. Ray Chan should have all the time he wants and needs to explain each and every one of the amendments he has put forward, so that there will be no misunderstanding of his amendments. It is now past 10 o'clock. This debate has now come to a close. Has 22, 37, 48, 49, 139, 140, 141, and 170. I ask for a quorum count.
全體委員會現在進行第三。
We now move on to the